Welcome to South Asia Maps. This is J. Reddy, your presenter at South Asia Maps, which brings the knowledge about the South Asian region, south of Karakoram Mountains and north of Kanyakumari, to our audience in the form of maps, pictures, iconographic form essentially. And today we are going to talk about the Punjab history, a very fascinating part that is called Treaty of Bhyroal, that was signed in 1846. That is the topic of discussion today. Before we go into the topic, and I would like to request our audience to go and subscribe the South Asia Maps channel at YouTube channel. I have already posted more than 80 videos or so. Very fascinating information in the form of iconographic form in various playlists like Jammu and Kashmir, Andhra Pradesh. You can see them, the Maratha Empire, the Vijayanagara Empire, the railway history, districts of India, districts of Pakistan, Bangladesh, Punjab history, Punjab region, and current politics, the Deccan region, India under imperialism, excuse me, the Mughal Empire, the miscellaneous chapters, Hyderabad, Nizams, the central provinces, that is Madhya Pradesh, that is Madhya Bharat, and Kerala, Bombay Presidency, Madras Presidency, and so on. Lot of fascinating information. And today's the topic of discussion is Treaty of Bhyroal. Excuse me for my allergies. After this presentation, you will get a fascinating idea of nearly 50 years of the history in Punjab region. This is what I will give you the context today, and you will have very clear understanding of the two prominent personalities involved in the negotiating and signing this treaty. He is Henry Lawrence or Henry Montgomery Lawrence, and his Sir Frederick Currie, and these are the prominent British leaders, the statesmen in the staff of the Governor General of East India Company, at that time Lord Hardinge. And before that, this is the overall context of our Punjab, and we are at Indraprastha, Delhi district, Delhi region, and this is the Yamuna river, the Sutlej river in the Himachali Punjab area, that is in the Lahore and Spiti area, comes and near Rupnagar, and it enters into the Punjab plain and separates the Firozpur district, Ludhiana district, Rupnagar district, and Ambala. This is Cis-Sutlej area. This is across the Sutlej, Trans-Sutlej area, and the river moves and separates the boundary between the Maharaja Ranjit Singh's territory, that is the Khalsa Sarkar or Sikh Sarkar or Lahore Darbar. South of it is the Bahawalpur, a princely state ruled by a Nawab, and the river continues, enters into Sindh province, and other prominent river Chenab, and here the Bias river. This is the Doab region, the region between the Sutlej river and Bias river, called Bist to Doab, that is B is Bias, S is Sutlej, essentially Kapurthala district and Sultanpur Lodi district, and Jalandhar district, Jalandhar, Nakodar, Nawanshar, and all those Phillaur and Phagwara, those regions, and Hoshiarpur district bordering the Sivaliks, the outer regions of the Himalayan mountains, and other prominent river is the Jhelum river, I have not shown, and this is the Indus river. Khalsa Sarkar at its maximum extent has Multan Suba here and Lahore Suba, Jammu region, Kashmir region and Ladakh region and Derawala region, that is the Baluchistan plateau here. Here the east of Baluchistan plateau, and of course it has Sarhad area, that is the frontier, that is Peshawar region. Peshawar, Kohat, Bannu and Hazara and Mardan and Swati and all those regions. This is in a sense the Punjab region we are talking about, and this is overall the the context. And there is Islamic imperialism, the establishment of Islam in Mecca, Medina, invasion of Sindh, then Ghaznavid invasion of Bharat, and Ghorid invasion and Mamluk sultans, finally Mughal Islamic imperialism. It was checkmated by the Marathas, and later Marathas lost the war in Panipat III at 1761, and Durranis and Marathas fought that war. Finally, in the end, there was a political vacuum in Bharat because Durranis across the Khyber Pass in Afghania were too weak to come back again, and they got tired and they worn out, and the British were very vigorous in the Gangetic plains after the Palasi battle as well as the Battle of Buxar, and there was a temporary political vacuum in the Punjab plains, the north of Sutlej river filled by Sikh principalities called Misls. There were many, more than 10. One among them was Sukerchakia Misl, Gujranwala district area. Ranjit Singh was the ruler, and he conquered Lahore round about 1800 and built a very big kingdom step by step. And he was a friend of British East India Company because he made a treaty, first Treaty of Amritsar 1809, and Maharaja passed away, and he has a very cordial relations with the various British Governor Generals. He started with Minto, Lord Minto, then Lord Hastings and Ormhurst, and the Lord Benting. Even he met the Lord Benting or William Benting at Ropnagar district on the bank of River Sutlej in 1830s or so. And then when Auckland was the Governor General, who succeeded William Benting, and he passed away in 1839. And the Sikh kingdom almost collapsed, entered into a complete anarchy. And during this time, British were already tightening their hold. Sikh army crossed the Sutlej river. That was the boundary between East India Company Bahadur territories and Maharaja's territories in north. In the first war, the Sikh War, Anglo-Sikh War, Sikhs got defeated and East India Company army moved into Punjab. That is, the Treaty of Lahore was signed. The Treaty of Lahore was signed in the same year in the March. First Treaty of Lahore is essentially indemnity treaty. That means the Sikh Khalsa Darbar has given the territory because it initiated the war. It gave the territory north of Sutlej, that is Trans-Sutlej regions, that is the Jalandhar Doab or Bist Doab. Simply in India today we call Doab or Doba region of Punjab, because in the West Punjab there are many Doabs because we have only one Doab, and that is called essentially Doba region, north of Sutlej and south of Bias river. That is Jalandhar and Hoshiarpur regions, and princely state of Malerkotla was under other Sikh Rajas' control. The indemnity treaty, in addition to that, Sikhs owed 150 lakh rupees or 1.5 crore rupees, and they had only 75 lakhs, so remaining 75 lakhs they traded the territory between the river Ravi here, that is near Pathankot area here, and all the hilly areas. This is the Jhelum river. That is the Jammu region, Katwa, Rajouri, Riyasi, the Mirpur region, the Poonch district, Muzaffarabad district, Ladakh and Kashmir Valley and all those areas. They have given to the British, and the British sold them to give to Raja Duleep Singh of Jammu and raised him into Maharaja. That happened 1 week later after the first Treaty of Lahore. The first Treaty of Lahore was signed in the March 9th. Exactly 1 week later, a Treaty of Amritsar, that is second Treaty of Amritsar, was signed in March. First Treaty of Lahore is essentially indemnity treaty. Now the British Army is in Punjabi territory as Maharaja territory. They controlled all the forts and ammunition and the guns and so on. And they are supposed to stay until December of 1846. And the people, the prominent leaders who negotiated the first Treaty of Lahore was Frederick Currie. Frederick Currie was the prominent statesman and foreign secretary to the British government of India, that is East India Company Bahadur, at Fort Williams in Bengal, that is in Calcutta. He was on the staff of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces that fought the Sikh War, and also Henry Montgomery Lawrence, or Lawrence brothers. There were three of them, and Henry was the second one, and the third one was John. He was much more prominent. He also later became the governor of Punjab province few years later, that we will discuss some other time. And his elder brother George Lawrence was also a very prominent statesman and soldier in the British government, fought the Afghan War just a few years before. These two people negotiated the first Treaty of Lahore. Then they also negotiated the Treaty of Amritsar that was signed between the East India Company Bahadur and Maharaja Duleep Singh of Jammu, where the Lahore Darbar was not at all involved at that time. And we will see how they strategically planned. They are supposed to leave, that means within 8 or 9 months, by December end Punjab, and go back to the British East India Company territories. They didn't do. After the Treaty of Occupation, they occupied and collected the indemnity. They became very close to the prominent courtiers of the Lahore Darbar. Maharaja Duleep Singh was the youngest descendant of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He was around about 10 months or so when Maharaja died in 1839 June. That means 1946, he was around about 6-7 years old. And his mother, Jindan Kaur, was the regent of the Maharaja. She was making the major decisions, and there are leaders in the Lahore Darbar assisting her. And these two representatives of Hardinge, Governor General, cultivated them. Finally, it was passed in such a way, all the Sardars requested the East India Company representatives in Punjab. Still the East India Company Bahadur's army is in Maharaja's territory. They asked keep these armed forces, their contingent battalion, for more years. How long? Until Maharaja Duleep Singh attains the majority. That will happen round about 1854 or so. That means we are in 1846, means 8 more years. And British, as usual, agreed, consented for that. That means now they modified the existing Treaty of Lahore that was signed in March of 1846. It was essentially the same treaty. They added further clauses. That means the British East India Company Bahadur will position its armed forces battalions in Punjab till Maharaja Duleep Singh will attain the age of majority, then it will leave the territory and Maharaja will rule by himself the Khalsa Sarkar, Lahore Darbar. And there is a very important clause next to that. Now, Jindan Kaur, mother of Duleep Singh, is the regent of Maharaja till he attains majority, and she was, instead of a regent, British put a clause making a Regency Council. In Regency Council, they nominated their friends, already existing leaders of the Darbar, 8 of them, like 6 predominantly, and 1 Hindu and 1 Muslim, that is 8. And Jindan Kaur was removed as a regent, and now the British Hardin's representative Henry Montgomery Lawrence was made president of the Regency Council. That means he will advise the council of 8 Sardars who was running the government. Essentially, de facto, Henry Montgomery Lawrence became the administrator of the Punjab Lahore Sarkar. That is very, very important. Jindan Kaur was taken away, removed from the Lahore so that she will not be interfering with the day-to-day affairs of the Sarkar, sent across River Ravi to Sheikhpura district. Later, they still were not comfortable. She was taken back to Benares, that was in the British East India Company's territory, Benares. She was pensioned off and sent there. That means essentially now there is a legal ruler who is a minor, Duleep Singh, who is advised by the 8 members of the Regency Council, and the head of that Regency Council is Henry Montgomery Lawrence. Henry Montgomery Lawrence is the head of the Regency Council, and Frederick Currie is the resident in Khalsa Darbar Court. Essentially, they administered the Punjab behind the scene. That is the Treaty of Bhyroal. Treaty of Lahore, that is the indemnity treaty in March. Next 1 week, Treaty of Amritsar, that is the cessation of the hilly regions between Ravi River and Jhelum River, that is the treaty with Gulab Singh Dogra, and within 8 or 9 months the Treaty of Bhyroal was signed. Treaty of Bhyroal virtually reduced the Khalsa Sarkar as a protectorate of the British East India Company, except in name. Still it is a sovereign state, but in theory, it is under the control of the British, because the advisor of the Regency Council, all the departments now has to take the advice of Henry Montgomery Lawrence. That means even though Henry Lawrence official position is the chairman of the Regency Council, in fact he is the governor of the Khalsa Sarkar. Later it became the British Punjab province few years later. This is essentially subsidiary alliance. In subsidiary alliance that the Peshwa signed in 1803 and also Asafzar II, Nizam Ali Khan signed in 1798, essence is the British army will be positioned in the native rulers' territories such as Hyderabad or Pune, and the army will be paid from the revenue of the state, that territory. If the ruler falls short of the army payment, the districts will be given to the British, and British will recruit, train, control the army, and they have the authority to use the army within the native territory or outside the territory for their own purpose. Essentially, the army will be fed by the local revenue. Treaty of Bhyroval was virtually like that, even though it was not called a subsidiary alliance treaty. Same treaty, Treaty of Bist, that the peace was signed in the Bassein or Vasai town, that is just a few kilometers outside of the Bombay city. When you take the train from the Bombay and going towards Valsad, Surat, Anand and Karnavati, Ahmedabad, Gandhinagar, within few kilometers across the Ullas River, there is a town called Vasai. At that time it's called Bassein, the Portuguese name. That treaty was signed by the Peshwa Bajirao to 1803. That was not called a subsidiary alliance treaty, but exactly the same. This treaty is also exactly the same. That is the Treaty of Bhyroal. That means these three treaties were signed within a single year. That is also very interesting to note. That is in 1896 itself. That is the Treaty of Lahore was signed in the March 9th. Treaty of Amritsar, that is the secession of Jammu and Kashmir region, Hilly regions, was signed 1 week later. And almost 7 or 8 months later, Treaty of Bhairowal was signed in 16th December. That means as per the treaty, and Regency Council was made, Jindan was removed from the council, Henry Montgomery Lawrence was made the chairman of the council, and British Army will stay till 4th September 1854 or so, when Duleep Singh will attain the majority and he will start ruling by himself. The treaty was negotiated by Frederick Currie, the Foreign Secretary to the Government of India, prominent British statesman, and also Henry Montgomery Lawrence. All these treaties was negotiated and were signed by these two representatives of Hardinge, Henry Hardinge or Lord Hardinge. Later, Lord Hardinge ratified them. Once these representatives, plenipotentiaries, signed it, the document will be sent to Calcutta and the Governor General will ratify it. That is a formality. Essentially, these two people signed on behalf of Governor General. And let us look at what is the legacy. That is all the treaty. We know the treaty signatories. These are the two signatories from the government of British India, Bahadur, East India Company, and from the Sikh side, Maharaja Duleep Singh's Sardars, 7 or 8 people, they are the signatories. This is the year. But what is the legacy? What does it tell? Left the effects, denouements on today's politics, history, economics. These are very vast amount of effect they have. Let's look at it. If this treaty was not signed on that day and British Army moved out of Punjab, that is the Khalsa Sarkar, that means even British fought similar wars with Nepal. They went into Nepal, they signed a treaty of in the Raksal and they come back. They didn't stay in Kathmandu after the Treaty of Segauli. Whereas in Punjab, they didn't do like that. They stayed there. That means they continued to stay in the territory of Maharaja. If they didn't sign this treaty and moved out of the Maharaja's territory, the Khalsa Darbar should have continued as a sovereign state and just like a Nepalese state. That means because during 1947, entire concept of Pakistan formation, Punjab was the linchpin, the main. The Pakistan simply means pure land, a Persian term, because the converts thought their land is impure because populated by the non-Muslims, that is the Kafirs, Hindus and Sikhs. Pakistan means Punjab for P, A for Afghania, that is Peshawar and Swabi, Mardhan and all these Kohat, Bannu, Khyber, these areas called Sarihad or Afghania. Pashtuni territories, that is Punjab, Afghania, Kashmir, And Stan is a generic term for the territory or land or a desh or watan, and yes, also for Sindh, that is Pakistan. If there is no Punjab, there will be no Pakistan. Today's Punjab, Pakistan is nothing but 55% of Punjabis. Pakistan, for all practical purpose, is a Punjabistan dominated, controlled by Punjabi Muslims ruling the rest of the population of Sindhis and Kashmiris, Baluchis, Brahmis, Pashtuns and all those people. There should have been no Pakistan formation. That means there should have been a Khalsa Sarkar across this territory, and once the British leave India, that means there will be a friendly government across the border, like across the Terai region of United Provinces, Uttar Pradesh. There is now a Nepalese state which is somewhat friendly. It's not antagonist to us. We are not talking about the normal other day-to-day the relations, some things in the two states that it always happens. This essentially it will not be a hostile state. Then what will be the other thing? That means essentially, if that Sarkar survived, if this treaty was not signed, because if this treaty was not signed, the next treaty within 2-3 years was the annexation treaty. That treaty should have not signed at all. That means there is a large number of Muslim population will be residing in the Khalsa Sarkar. Nearly 80% of the population will be Muslims, Punjabis and Pashtuns and some Baluchis and Brahmis. How that Khalsa Sarkar should have dealt with them is very, very interesting, because the same Islamic problem India, due to lack of intellectual understanding of what Islam is in the Indian intellectualism, that was done by only after partition by Mahayogi Sri Ram Swarup Sitarama Goyalji of Voice of India. That was not available, the doctrinary before that. And how Khalsa leaders should have dealt with will be very interesting to see. Anyway, the India will not be having that much Islamic aggression, which I personally feel, but still the eternal Islamic hostility to Indian Hindus, Kafirs will be there. That means that Sarkar ruling Lahore with 80% of very pugnacious, warmongering or very belligerent Muslims will be definitely has to be work in cooperation with the Indian state. That should have been one of the legacy. If this treaty Bhyroval was not signed, and the next treaty, Lahore II treaty, annexion treaty, will not be signed. That is also an important thing we have to keep in mind. That is about the Treaty of Bhyroval. Let's go and look at some of the land, the Lahore Treaty, the first Lahore Treaty. The British were south of Cis-Sutlej River here, Ludhiana and Ambala here, and Firozpur will be somewhere here. And you have Ludhiana, Firozpur and Ambala here, and Rupnagar will be here, because this is Bakranangal, the river kissed the Sivalix mountain here. You can see the Bakranangal dam in blue color here. And after the Treaty of Lahore, the Indemnity Treaty, British moved their armed forces across Jalandhar, Phagwara, Hoshiarpur. Now, instead of Sutlej, the Bias became their boundary with the Khalsa Sarkar. And after 1 week later, the second Treaty of Amritsar was signed. This is the Pathankot, this is the Ravi River here. And Lahore is on the bank of Ravi River. All the hilly terrains north of Ravi River, and east of Jhelum River here. This is the Jhelum River here. You see, this all the mountainous territories. This the Jhelum. Originally, it was the Indus boundary. That is, Hazara district was given. Later, they modified with the Treaty of Amritsar with Maharaja Duleep Singh, and they kept the Hazara region. That is Abbottabad, Manshera, and all those Haripur, all those regions. And Jhelum essentially became the boundary between Maharaja territories. And so all these areas were given to Maharaja Duleep Singh, including this valley, the beautiful valley. You can see the Pir Panjal mountains here. Himadri mountains are greater Himalayan mountains here. Between these you have the valley of Kashmir and Vale of Kashmir, and you can see the beautiful the gorge, the Jhelum gorge here, and here there will be Muzaffarabad here, and the river start Jhelum going down here, Potwar Plateau here, and that means all the Subhas now army still stayed in Punjab, and after the Bhairowal Treaty, now the British completely controlled. They stay put in the Multan region, in Peshawar region, and in Lahore region, and across the Sutlej, their friendly state was there, Bahawalpur, and south of Kashmir town, they have Sindh, that is the division in the Bombay Presidency. They already conquered it 1843. That is in essence about the Treaty of Bhyroal. So in this I have delineated almost 100 years of the key military and political events that has happened in that region. We discussed about the Islamic imperialism, Mughal imperialism, Durrani imperialism, Maratha Hindu nationalism, Battle of Panipat III and 1761, and final replacement of Marathas and Sikhs by British imperialism, death of Maharaja 1839, Anglo-Sikh Wars in 45 and 46, and 3 treaties signed in the same year. That is the first Treaty of Lahore in the 9th March, second Treaty of Amritsar in 16th March, 1 week later, and almost 8 months later, Treaty of Bhyroval, that is Subsidiary Alliance Treaty, where Jindan Kaur as a representative was replaced by Henry Montgomery Lawrence. Virtually Punjab came under the British control. This is the penultimate step, precursor step in the British strategy of annexing Punjab, and they should have annexed in the same time the Treaty of Lahore. They didn't do it, and they wanted to give some time and consolidated their position. So we talked about the legacy and the Pakistan movement and Khalsa Sarkar friendly compared with the Nepalese Sarkar, and eternal Islamic the belligerence and aggression on the Kafirs, and how this should have been changed in the after the British left, when if the Khalsa Sarkar has stayed put in Lahore, that means the Khalsa Sarkar will be handling the lot of Afghan related issues, because the Durand line excuse me, or the Khyber Pass will be in their control rather than the Indian control. That means instead of having the hostile Pakistan, we should be having a somewhat friendly or neutral, a Khalsa Sarkar, essentially a Sikh government or Khalistan or Khalsa government there. The prominent signatories from the British side are Henry Montgomery Lawrence, the middle of the 3 Lawrence brothers, who played a very prominent role in the Punjab history, and we'll take that some other time, and other foreign secretary to Lord Hardinge, the Frederick Currie, the signatories on the behalf of Lord Hardinge, and Sardars signed on behalf of Maharaja Duleep Singh, who was around about 7 or 8 years old at that time, as a minor ruler of the Lahore Darbar or Khalsa Darbar. This is your presenter J. Reddy, and I appreciate you joining me, and we'll see you in the next time. And please promote and subscribe our channel, and which is a channel for learning this, a channel of intellectual Kshatriyas for learning the knowledge about the South Asian region in the form of icons and maps. And thank you very much, and see you later.